Okay.
So for now, we'll have questions there. That's quite a chunk, right? So Alan, basically, you can like take from that smorgasbord, right? Take them in whatever order you like.
Oh, really? It's
yeah.
not based on how you listed them. It's
Yeah. I mean,
pick and choose.
ease for you,
All
right? So 'cause
right.
some of those are
Maybe
probably
some
gonna
of
be
them are
really
really quick and simple.
right. So
let's
pick
do
them
the
and then
let's
just
do
go
the
right down that list.
the proverbial low-hanging fruit first. The website with the papers on it is called the word ONE, onenewmexico.com. And you'll find up at the top, it'll say something like working papers. And if you click on that, you'll find a whole slew of things that we put out over the last 3 or 4 years. MIHO, great program. The thing about the fire department and the way the fire department is being run that I've learned as a candidate, because one of the things you do as a candidate is you talk to the folks who are in those jobs right now and you try to get up to speed. We have a very talented group of people leading data-driven response approach to emergency medical and other interventions. And if you're a fan, as I am, of some of the writings of people who have looked at healthcare and combining healthcare with data analysis, that's what MIHO is doing. It's saying, who are the folks who use the services most often and why do they do it, and how can we get ahead of the curve and prevent problems rather than responding to problems. And I think the fire department, from the folks that I've spoken with, are really, really talented, very analytical and service oriented, and we ought to do more of that. It's a really smart way to provide public services and get better results. So my own opinion is it's working well and it should be supported, and not just in that program, but as an overall notion that data will tell you how to be more productive and more efficient and more preventive rather than remedial, which is always more expensive.
Can I follow
Follow
up
up.
quickly?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
So I'd also like to know what more you think the city can do to provide access to healthcare, and I'd also like to know what you think about our hospital and soon-to-be hospitals here in Santa Fe,
Yeah.
and what the city can do to improve.
Well, one of the city supports
That's-
La Familia very, very strongly, and I went down there a couple weeks ago to sit down with the leadership. They are, I think, doing something really smart, which is they want to be seen not only as a provider of healthcare to those who have less, who are more needy and less financially well off. They want to be so good, they want to be everybody's healthcare provider. And they're trying to reposition, reimagine, and re-staff themselves to do that. One very simple example that they gave me was that if you go in for a checkup, physical checkup at La Familia, they want it also to be a psychological and emotional checkup. So you do all of it at one time, and in the city where we have an enormous amount of behavioral health issues, it's prevention rather than remediation. I have signed up for, but have not yet done, an evening at the Christus emergency room. I told them I wanted to spend a few hours in the emergency room just watching that experience, because I did do a police ride-along. You'll learn a lot just by being there and seeing what happens. I think the city does have a responsibility to work more, Nate mentioned it, more collaboratively with the county. In general, on a lot of the healthcare and behavioral health issues, the county is the lead agent and we are less directly the provider. But to me, these distinctions of city and county boundaries, while they are how we keep score, when it comes to delivering services, don't make a lot of sense. And so I think that the next mayor and the next council have to look for ways to collaborate with the county and with the state when it comes to healthcare, and particularly healthcare for low-income people. The governor did one thing right in her entire term, and that is to expand Medicaid coverage, and that's been a huge boon to New Mexico overall. And we'll see what the Trump administration does to undo that. I think a lot of it has to do with taking what we're doing, combining it more effectively, and being more of a convener and an organizer and a catalyst, rather than city is not really going to be in the healthcare business per se. going forward. We'll invest in kids and seniors and families, but not providing health care. Underwriting La Familia is something we do. Were there any other things that I thought were easy? No, they're all hard. The issue of that Jose raised, I believe in community work agreements. I think the mayor ought to look at any time there is a violation. I spoke with I was endorsed by the CLC and have met with your union, with most of the construction trades. And they are very concerned, as you are, about non-union jobs that are not living up to good work practices, safe work practices, safe construction practices. And I said to them what I would say to you, and it is in part an answer to what a person from the private sector can bring to the public sector, and that is the notion that the public sector always goes for the low bid is not always a good idea. You end up with people who then come in with change orders and sloppy work and work that needs to be fixed. It's remediation rather than getting it right the first time. Union jobs are done right the first time. The workers are trained. The specs are clear. The requirements are clear, and I'm a huge supporter of that. I think we do our citizens and our community a disservice when we think we're saving money, but we end up producing shoddy work and work that has to be redone because it wasn't done right the first time. So I think my questionnaire responses to the questions that were asked by the building trades should be a matter of public record, and I really stood shoulder to shoulder with the union and with the effort to make sure that we protect and really represent the rights and the interests of the working men and women in our community. What else have we got here? Strong mayor in Sanctuary City. There's absolutely no question that what's happening in the country and what's happening with ICE is destructive to Santa Fe. I've been spending most of my time as a candidate knocking on doors on the south side and going to coffees and meetings with folks on the south side. Immigrant groups, sitting down with SOMOs, sitting down with the chainbreaker folks and just listening to what they're worried about. In addition, when I ran for governor, I was very active down in Las Cruces with an organization called Olay. And the woman who was the head of that actually was one of the people who, at the Democratic pre-primary convention, put my name into nomination. What we're doing is, it's criminal. In my family, the worst thing you could say, the worst insult you could call somebody was stupid, because my folks loved education. So I guess I'd say this is the stupidest thing I've ever seen in the United States, other than military interventions. Declaring war on people is stupid.
It's cruel.
And cruel and mean-spirited. Pick your adjective. In Santa Fe and in New Mexico, it's even worse because of our history and our culture and the composition of our community. Every time there is an ICE raid, you can see school attendance plummet in Santa Fe. Kids stay home, and they're afraid that if they go to school, when they come home, somebody will be gone, and they won't find their family. And that's unacceptable. So for me as mayor, I think the things we do are simply continue to stand by the immigrant community, have them know that in me, if I am the next mayor, they'll have somebody who understands and represents their interests and will protect them. I think the place where it'll come up most directly and most immediately is in the hiring of our new police chief. You all know this, we have 2 police chiefs right now, which is not a good way to manage anything. But it was a way of solving the problem of the chief moving and leaving a vacancy and the mayor and the council not wanting to hire somebody in the face of an election. So the new mayor will be in a position to hire a police chief. And there are questions there both about process and policy. I've said publicly, and it's on my campaign website, that if I am elected, I will have a citizens group that will help vet the candidates. And I didn't say this explicitly, but it is true that on that citizens group will be representatives of SOMOS and other organizations that have a huge stake in that decision. I know from meeting with SOMOS leadership that they look at the Farmington, interestingly enough, they look at Farmington as an example where the chief has, and the police force over there has been very sensitive to immigrant rights issues. So they know what they think is a good model. That's the process side. The policy side is, and I said this in front of a meeting of the police and fire union, we need a police chief who is a 21st century police chief and who embraces community policing and who embraces the idea that while the thing that most police officers and police forces around the country think about is public safety and arrests, I know from my experience working in the mayor's office in Portland that what the police do most work around is domestic disputes. And that's where they get hurt, and that's where most of the calls come in. And that what we really have in most police departments are highly trained, highly equipped, highly skilled psychologists and social workers whose job it is to de-escalate potentially violent situations. It goes back to training, it goes back to policy, it goes back to leadership, and it represents a definition of how you want your police to interact with the community. I was very fortunate when I worked in the mayor's office in Portland. The sheriff of Multnomah County was a gentleman named Lee Brown. You look him up. Lee Brown went from being the county sheriff in Multnomah County to being the head of the police in New York City, where he introduced community policing. I did, when I was running the Harvard Business Review, I did a ride-along and an interview with Lee Brown on community policing for the Harvard Business Review, not because it was about business, but because it was about social policy and leadership. Lee went on to be the chief of police in Houston and then the mayor. And I saw him a year ago. He was the key speaker at the NAACP event here in New Mexico, and he's getting up there, but he's still a strong advocate for community policing. So those are two areas where this issue that you're asking about, which is what does it mean to be a sanctuary city and how do we live it, I think will be the tests of the next mayor. Okay? Okay. Green energy, sustainable economy. I'm not picking and avoiding. I'm just, whatever pops up at me, I'm going through. I have said that we ought to be the most sustainable city in America. And we have that opportunity. I said when I ran for governor, we ought to be the most sustainable state in America. We are like the second highest potential for solar energy in the United States, and we rank somewhere in the middle in terms of solar jobs. I have no idea what Trump's new trade policy will do, but it makes no sense for Santa Fe not to actually continue to go full speed ahead toward renewable energy. In our community, it's predominantly going to be solar. Statewide, it's actually wind energy is the biggest opportunity for New Mexico. There's a gentleman down in Albuquerque named Tom Solomon who's done a write-up on how to make the entire state of New Mexico the most renewable state in the country. And one of his interesting factoids, if you're interested in jobs and sustainability, we have the highest potential for wind energy and the largest population of a state with that amount of potential. And in states that are on that matrix, we're the only one that doesn't manufacture windmills. So you think about it, we ought to not only be tapping into renewable energy, we ought to be manufacturing the tools to make renewable energy happen. I think of renewable and sustainable practices as being Santa Fe's sweet spot. I recently was endorsed by the Sierra Club because I talked to them about the fact that in the old days we used to think there was a dichotomy between economy and ecology, and we now know in today, many of us have known it for a long time, but we know it today, that the best way to conserve energy and to have a livable community is to practice wise land use planning, integrate transportation so that transit is part of your construction and housing policy and jobs policy and energy policy, and the pieces fit together to have a renewable, livable, and sustainable community. We have not updated our land use general plan since 1999, and the world has changed. We have a huge housing crisis in Santa Fe. People differ, but let's say 4,000 units we're short. Those are always talked about as affordable, but the truth is there are all kinds of housing units we're short. We're short on solving the problem of homelessness. We're short on solving the problem of senior citizens who want to downsize and move to something smaller than the big single-family home they had when they had a family. And in between, we don't have worker housing, we don't have affordable rentals, we don't have, HomeWise is doing a pretty good job with first-time home buyers, and frankly, HomeWise is doing a great job with a program that Mike Lofton created to put solar into the HomeWise projects. I've talked about in my campaign helping people who live in many of our South Side trailer park developments have solar energy as part of their developments. The cheapest form of new energy, I think we all know, is energy conservation. That's the cheapest way to generate new energy is to stop wasting the energy we're already generating. The city ought to partner with construction trades to go into people's homes who are lower income and provide conservation insulation, protect their homes so we're not losing the energy and making them pay for it twice. That's done in many communities around the United States. It's not done here. Part of the role of that is working with the PRC. Valerie Espinoza, who is our representative on the PRC in this district, has endorsed me. I think we could, depending on this upcoming election, really do some good work with the PRC. There's a terrific guy down in Las Cruces who has also endorsed me, who's a former state senator, Steve Fishman, who's been fighting against El Paso Electric to try to make them go more strongly toward renewable energy. If we got Steve on the PRC, Valerie on the PRC, me in the mayor's office, Tim Keller, mayor of Albuquerque, I think there could be a strong regional push for a much more sustainable economy. The short answer to your question, which I didn't give you, is the city ought to put solar panels on all our buildings. We ought to work with the county to put solar panels on all their buildings, the school district on their buildings. We ought to take a lesson from some of the more progressive businesses that have put solar panels on their covered parking. It's really criminal if we don't do that.
What about recycling and composting?
I don't know that much about composting, but recycling, I think we took a big step backward when we stopped picking up glass, and I don't know why that was done, but if I am the mayor, I'm going to find out why it was done and how to change that, because it doesn't make sense to me to have, we tell people, take your glass to the recycling station, and I know very few people who want to go do that. So we've actually shot ourselves in the foot on that. Oh, I'm supposed to go to the board. More money to poor neighborhoods and power within government. I have proposed something called the Office of Neighborhood Associations. Right now, what we have in Santa Fe is a long-standing adversarial relationship between neighborhoods and the city. It's partly an explanation for why we have a housing crisis. We've set up a system that is designed to fail, and it delivers failure with great results. We fail regularly. The city only, as far as I know, has a relationship with the neighborhood associations that is structured around crisis. So what will happen typically is, you all know this, but it's worth going through the bidding. So the city will say, there's a piece of land over here let's put housing on it. And then the neighborhood will go, why are you picking on our neighborhood? We're gonna stop it, no housing on that piece of land. We're coming out and we're preventing it from happening. And then the city goes, oh, these neighborhoods are so hard to work with, they're against everything, they're only NIMBYists. And then the developers say, it's impossible to do business in Santa Fe, we're not gonna build housing. Which is why we have 1,400 housing units that we've approved and haven't been built. It's why we've had an overlay district in St. Mike's since 1999 and 0 housing units built on St. Mike's. So I have a very simple approach which I think would make a big difference. And that is, we create something called the Office of Neighborhood Associations. It becomes a thing in city government. Neighborhood associations apply to be recognized by the city government. City government helps neighborhoods that have not been organized or have not organized themselves yet to have that kind of an entity. And we create some very simple criteria, just like you have some very simple criteria for how you would want to run your meetings. The city says these are the things you have to agree to do to be a recognized neighborhood association. Once that happens, we start meeting with the neighborhoods and we ask them what they want to make their neighborhoods more livable, more sustainable, more inclusive, to get the information they want out of the city government, and to have a chance to put their ideas into the makeup of the city budget. In exchange for that kind of dialogue, we ask that they not only think about their part of the city, but think about the city as a whole. Because I think we know, as Mr. Former Senator, late Senator Wellstone said, we all do better when we all do better. So it's okay that you pay attention to your neighborhood, but we need 4,000 housing units citywide. We need better transit citywide. We need better jobs citywide. So let's have an Office of Neighborhood Associations. We'll pay attention to equity. We'll pay attention to who has been overlooked historically. And we will attempt to have a new way to change the dialogue from us versus you to what do we do to make your neighborhood the kind of place you want it to be going forward? Is it sidewalks? Is it parks and recreation? Does it really come down to more police presence because some neighborhoods have a tougher time with the impact of the opioid epidemic? What would make you feel like the city is paying attention to your neighborhood? And then the city, I think, can legitimately say, now let's talk about the city as a whole. Would you think that that parcel could be developed into affordable housing if we're doing it citywide? And I think that changes the dynamic from episodic, periodic adversarialism to an ongoing conversation about what's good for your neighborhood and what's good for the city as a whole. I also think a separate issue, which you talked about, which has to do with equity and power, you would have to be willfully blind not to recognize that the south side of Santa Fe has been ignored, left behind, left out, treated poorly for years. I have said as mayor, if I get elected, I'm going to put city council meetings we're going to hold city council meetings in every part of the city. We're going to have city council meetings so that people don't have to come to City Hall. We're going to bring City Hall to you. When I say that in the south side, they say, that's great. Where are you going to have the meeting in our part of town? And they're right. I mean, we could do it at the library, we could do it at a high school, but the city has never invested in a public space that would be appropriate for that kind of a gathering. And so when you think about equity, fairness, and the budget, and I go back to the notion that the mayor for the first time gets to articulate a vision of the city in the budget, that's a place to rectify that problem. The same is true about transit, by the way. I told you I worked in the Secretary's office in the Department of Transportation. And transportation is really not about transportation, it's about mobility. And what we have is a bunch of people who in the city who've been mobility disadvantaged. and we don't design our transit services around mobility for people who need it, we design it around bus routes. And so I think what we need to do as a city is to go back to the principle that it's really about people and their needs to get where they need to get to, and how does the city develop the system and the services to make that happen. And I think in the world we live in, there are lots of ways to be innovative and creative around that. This is a place where Ron and I agree. We could have smaller van services. We can have jitney services. You can have local community services. We can be creative and grassroots based and actually develop a different sensibility about how we respond to the needs of people who are really dependent on transit to get where they need to go.
Can we make transit free?
Well, that was Joseph's proposal, and I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I know that right now we get very little in the way of the ridership doesn't pay for much to begin with. But before I say yes, I'd have to actually look at the data and see what it looks like. Somebody mentioned at the forum yesterday, Denver has free transit.
Los Alamos does.
Los Alamos does. So I think it's, this is the kind of question you don't just pop off an answer, but I haven't done the research.
We have a fine free transit network all over northern New Mexico. The blue.
Yes, there are parts of it that aren't free. That's
Yeah.
exactly already.
Yeah.